It is November 1532, in the high valley of Cajamarca. The air is thin, the ground is hard-packed dirt and stone. A crowd fills the square. Men in bright cloth stand shoulder to shoulder. Some carry clubs and slings, others hold standards. They wait for their ruler. Atahualpa enters with attendants and guards. He has just won a civil war that tore through the leadership of the empire. He is confident. He expects a meeting, a display, an exchange of words and gifts. Hidden around the plaza are Spanish soldiers under Francisco Pizarro. They have steel, firearms, and horses. They have planned the moment. A signal goes up, a cannon fires. Smoke rolls across the square. Horses surge forward. Men shout in Spanish. The crowd pushes and collapses into itself. Swords strike at close range. Atahualpa is seized in the crush. He is pulled off his litter. Hands grab his arms and clothing. He is dragged into a building near the square. The Spanish close doors and guard them. In a single afternoon, a ruler who stands at the center of the state is taken alive by a small force that crossed an ocean and then climbed into the Andes. The capture at Cajamarca becomes leverage. It becomes a ransom. It becomes orders carried to distant towns. It becomes fear inside a government that runs through one person. From here, the empire that expanded so fast begins to come apart. The rise and fall of Inca Empire. The rulers who later controlled the empire claimed an origin that began far from their capital. Priests and court speakers told of a beginning at Lake Titicaca, where a divine power sent founders into the world with a mission to bring order. In those stories, the founders carried sacred objects and knowledge, walked until the land signaled the right place, and established a center that would rule 4 directions. Those stories served a purpose. They gave authority a pedigree. They made conquest sound like a duty. The early reality was smaller and harsher. In the high valleys of what is now Peru, communities lived in tight kin groups that worked fields in steep terrain. People built terraces and irrigation channels. They stored potatoes and maize. They raised llamas and alpacas on higher ground. They traded salt, dried fish, cloth, and metal across long distances. They also fought. Raids and local wars were part of life. A village that lost a fight could lose land, herds, and people. In the valley of Cusco, a small ruling group rose among many rivals. They made alliances through marriage. They demanded labor and goods from nearby communities. They built ritual spaces and held feasts to bind supporters. They fought neighbors who resisted. Over time, their leaders turned the valley into a base. The turning point came in the 15th century, during a crisis that threatened that base. Enemies pressed in. The ruling family faced the possibility of losing Cusco itself. Out of that conflict came a leader remembered as Pachacuti. He is tied in the tradition to a decisive defense and a political overhaul that followed. After that, the project changed in scale. The state became more organized. The capital became more controlled. The rulers rebuilt Cusco with stonework that signaled permanence. They laid out sacred spaces and administrative spaces. They gathered the dead rulers of earlier reigns into the political life of the court, treating royal mummies as continuing members of the elite. They expanded the cult of the sun and tied political loyalty to ritual duty. Then came expansion by force. In Inca practice, conquest began with diplomacy and ended with violence when needed. Envoys offered terms. Local leaders could keep status if they accepted the Inca ruler as superior, paid tribute, and provided labor. A leader who refused faced an army. Inca armies moved on foot. They carried slings, clubs, spears, and axes. They wore quilted armor and helmets. They marched with supplies and with men assigned to carry food and equipment. When they entered a region, they aimed at the local political center. They took hostages. They demanded submission. They killed leaders who resisted and replaced them with men who would cooperate. The state also offered benefits that made submission practical. It built roads and bridges that connected isolated valleys. It built storehouses packed with food, cloth, and weapons. It staged large public feasts where local elites ate, drank chicha beer, and received gifts. It gave some communities access to goods and status that would be difficult to secure alone. The system depended on labor, organized on a vast scale. Households owed the state work rotations. Men were called up to build terraces, dig canals, quarry stone, and serve in armies. They also worked state fields and tended herds set aside for the ruler and for the sun cult. In return, the state redistributed stored food and cloth, especially during shortages and during campaigns. To make that work, the Inca built infrastructure that still marks the mountains. The Quapac Ñan carried messengers, armies, and officials across ridges and deserts. Stone stairs climbed steep slopes. Rope bridges spanned gorges. Way stations offered shelter and supplies. Relay runners carried messages in short bursts, passing spoken reports and knotted cords to the next man. The empire had a name for itself. Tawantinsuyu meant the four parts together. From Cusco, the state described the world in four quarters that radiated outward. That language was political. It put the capital at the center and treated distant lands as parts of a single design. Expansion moved in waves. One reign would secure a new region. The next would tighten control, punish rebellions, and push again. A major phase of conquest is linked to Topa Inca Yupanqui. Under his leadership and under his father's influence, the empire pushed beyond the highland core into richer and more complex territories. The greatest prize on the north coast was the kingdom centered at Chanchan. That coastal power had its own engineers, its own state workshops, and its own hierarchy. When the Inca took it, they gained skilled labor, new administrative knowledge, and a coastline tied into the imperial system. Conquest did not end with a battle. Holding territory required constant work. The Inca used local rulers as intermediaries. A community's leader could become a broker who collected tribute, organized labor drafts, and reported up the chain. The Inca also planted colonies. They moved groups of people from one region to another and settled them in strategic areas. These relocated families brought skills and loyalty. They also broke the connection between a rebellious population and its home terrain. A family could be ordered to pack what it could carry, leave its fields behind, and start again under guard in a different valley. Religious policy reinforced that control. The Inca allowed many local cults to continue. They also demanded recognition of the sun and of the Inca ruler's sacred status. In conquered centers, they installed shrines and officials. They collected sacred objects and sometimes moved them to the capital as political hostages, keeping the symbols of a community's identity close to Inca oversight. Meanwhile, the rulers built an imperial image in stone. Estates and ceremonial sites spread through the highlands. One of the most famous, Machu Picchu, is tied to the imperial period and the elite world of royal estates, skilled stonework, and controlled access. These were not random monuments. They were built by directed labor and maintained by assigned communities. By the early 16th century, the empire stretched across most of the Andean spine. Its northern reach pushed into what is now Ecuador. Its southern frontier ran deep into the valleys that lead towards central Chile. Along that length were deserts with few water sources, high plateaus with brutal cold, cloud forests with heavy rain, and coastal plains where irrigation made dense settlement possible. The state tried to manage all of it through roads, storehouses, local intermediaries, and military threat. The speed of this rise created strengths and weaknesses at the same time. A strong ruler could move resources fast. He could call up armies. He could shift food from one region to another. He could punish a province and then rebuild it under new terms. He could demand loyalty through ritual and through fear. That same centralization made succession dangerous. Late in the expansion era, the throne passed to Huayna Capac, a ruler linked to further consolidation and long campaigns, especially in the north. He spent extended periods away from Cusco, directing operations and managing distant elites. That widened the empire, but it also tied stability to a single person's authority. In the mid-1520s, Huayna Capac died, likely during a wave of disease moving through the Andes ahead of direct Spanish contact. The loss of a ruler opened a fight over legitimacy. The royal family and the generals split. The empire that had expanded through discipline and logistics turned inward. Two claimants emerged as the main rivals: Huascar, associated with the Cusco court, and Atahualpa, associated with the north and with veteran commanders. The war between them tore through the army and the administration. Captains who had conquered new provinces now fought fellow subjects. Cities and storehouses became targets. Prisoners were executed. Loyalists were purged. The victor inherited a damaged machine. Atahualpa won. He took Huascar prisoner. He eliminated opponents. He moved south toward Cusco to secure the core. Then Pizarro arrived on the edge of that crisis. By 1532, Pizarro's force had marched inland with indigenous allies and interpreters, following reports of wealth and a powerful ruler. When they reached Cajamarca, they faced an emperor who had just finished the hardest part of his own war. Atahualpa came to the meeting with confidence and with a massive entourage. The Spanish chose the ground and the moment. They attacked from concealment. They focused on the emperor's body. After the ambush, Atahualpa was a prisoner in a small room, guarded day and night. He still tried to rule. He sent orders through messengers. He offered a bargain. He promised a ransom in precious metals large enough to fill a room to a marked height. His subjects and officials began collecting objects from temples and storehouses. They stripped gold and silver from sacred places. They carried it across long roads into Spanish hands. The ransom arrived. The Spanish divided much of it among themselves. They still kept Atahualpa under guard. They tried to control him through interpreters and through pressure from rival factions. In 1533, Atahualpa was executed after a short and contested process. The empire lost the man who had just won the civil war. It also lost the appearance of order at the top. From there, Spanish success depended on existing fractures. Some provinces had been conquered by the Inca within living memory. Many had grievances. Some saw the Spanish as a tool to break Cusco's control. Others tried to play both sides. Some simply tried to survive by submitting to whoever had weapons at the moment. The Spanish also learned to use the imperial system. They moved along roads that had been built for Inca armies. They relied on storehouses that held food and cloth. They coerced local officials who already knew how to organize labor. The empire's infrastructure became a resource for its invaders. In Cusco, the Spanish installed a new ruler as a client, and demanded obedience. They seized estates and women from the royal lineage. They raided temples. They took precious metals wherever they found them. They also fought among themselves over spoils and authority, bringing another layer of instability. The Inca response was not a single collapse. It was a series of decisions under pressure. One of the most important resistance leaders was Manco Inca Yupanqui. At first, he worked with the Spanish, trying to secure a position within a changing power structure. As Spanish demands grew and abuses increased, he broke with them. In 1536, he led a major uprising and laid siege to Cusco. His forces attacked Spanish positions, cut routes, and fought for control of the high ground. The siege failed. Spanish cavalry and indigenous allies helped break it. Manco Inca retreated into a more defensible region west of Cusco, into the forested valleys and ridges of Vilcabamba. There, a smaller Inca state survived for decades. It relied on difficult terrain, local support, and constant movement. It negotiated at times and fought at others. It also endured internal divisions and relentless Spanish pressure. In the 1570s, Spanish authorities decided to end that last holdout. A campaign pushed into Vilcabamba. The final ruler, Tupac Amaru, was captured and brought to Cusco. In 1572, he was executed in public. The last independent Inca court ended under Spanish law and Spanish weapons. The rise of the Inca Empire had taken only a few generations, driven by conquest, forced labor, and a state built for movement and storage. Its fall began when the leadership cracked, when disease spread, and when outsiders arrived at the moment the system was most exposed. Stone walls still stand on ridges, roads still cut across slopes, storehouses still sit above valleys where cold air keeps grain dry. The empire's infrastructure survived longer than its rulers. The people who lived under it survived longer than the empire itself.